The question is literally or seriously. Whether it is metaphorical, whether it is poetic, whether it is apocalyptic, we take the Bible seriously because it is about the salvation of the world in Christ. It answers the ultimate question, who are we before God, and what has God done for us that we may stand before Him and justify? You often hear that the Bible is written by men in power to further their agenda. My question back is, if that's the case, don't you think they could have done a better job? I mean, honest to goodness, 66 books that's all over the map. And even in the Gospels, just take the 4 Gospels, the disciples look like idiots. The people of great faith, who are the people of great faith in the Gospels? Gentiles, Roman soldiers, outsiders, lepers, Samaritans. The disciples are the last to get it. Even Jesus doesn't look so good. I mean, look when He was done. How many followers did He have when He disappeared? 120. They all fit into a room. He got Himself crucified, appeared 40 days, and then disappears. See ya. Go preach the gospel. If I'm making up a religion, I'm not going this way. If this is going to put people into power, it's got their heads cut off. People died claiming they saw Christ bodily risen from the dead. So you've got to remember that Christianity didn't come into power until the 4th century. So for 300 years, there was no gain whatsoever. There was no cash, no chicks, no prizes, no nothing. I hear this a lot in my science circles. The discovery of evolution is disproved in the Bible. Okay, no more than Copernicus and Einstein disproved the Bible. Genesis 1 and 2. Do you know what I do with that? I throw it away. It's not up for discussion. A lot of people don't like that. Got to defend creation. That's a conversation for later. I tell people, even Christians disagree on how to read that text. So let's talk about Christ. You can believe the world was created in 6 24-hour consecutive days and still go to hell if that's all you believe. Save that for beers or something. I'm not dismissing that, but that's Genesis 1. It's 1. It's just Genesis 1. That's all it is. And Genesis 1 is cool, and I'd love to teach a section on Genesis 1. But, arguing with a skeptic, we're getting nowhere because they're looking at scientific data and we're looking at a revelation of the mind of God. One thing I'd like to ask, if you want to talk about it, is if I create a tree on Wednesday and I cut it down on Thursday and it's got 100 rings on the stump, what do I scientifically conclude about the age of the tree? It's 100 years old. How old is it really? A day. But no right-minded scientist would conclude that. So I don't blame them. Evolution is a good stab. It's a good stab at explaining data. Not the best one, but it's a good stab. You can, if you're sophisticated enough, debate the scientific data, but you better do your homework because you can embarrass yourself in that. I just leave it out of the discussion. We're here to talk about the God we know. And the God we know is, like Luther said, the one who sucked the breast of his mother and who hung dead on a cross. All that other stuff, that's fun for, it's fun for intramural discussions. I like Christopher Hitchens. Religion has run out of justifications. Thanks to the telescope and the microscope, it no longer offers an explanation of anything important. Here's the problem. It's not the purpose of religion to explain things. It's the purpose of science to explain things. Religion deals with questions like why. Science can't explain why. Not at all. Even forensic science. Why did he kill the guy? That's not a question for forensic science. Just, did he kill the guy? That's all that matters. I like G.K. Chesterton on this, referring to evolution. He says, it's absurd for the evolutionists to claim it's unthinkable for an admittedly unthinkable God to make everything out of nothing. And then pretend it's more thinkable that nothing should turn itself into everything. That is clever, but it is to the point. You got to believe something. It is a religion to believe that nature has its own inherent intelligence and can order itself. Sometimes you hear that miracles aren't possible in an ordered universe. Well, just tell Heisenberg about that, okay? Because even scientific stuff is not all that certain. In finally, watch the hasty conclusion. You know, if I encounter a corpse with a knife in its back and I say this can't possibly be a murder, it's got to be suicide because we don't have murders in this community, that's bad forensic science right there. I've made a conclusion before I've looked at the facts. Before you conclude that water cannot possibly change into wine, and virgins can't possibly conceive, and dead men can't possibly arise from the dead, you have to check the facts. If you say a priori that can't happen, that's not good, reasonable, scientific thinking. That's not how you do history. You look at the facts. The Bible's full of errors and contradictions. I hear this all the time. It usually means you haven't read the Bible. Can you name 3? What this usually means is there are differences in perspective. There's reader ignorance. We don't know everything. You know, the Revelation's hard to understand because we're not living in that century. Author limitations, sometimes anachronisms. We impose 21st century thinking and perspective on first century people, and that's very unfortunate. Just because Paul didn't know atomic theory doesn't mean he can't articulate the doctrine of justification. So don't go there. Or paradoxes. I mean, yeah, the Bible contradicts itself. God is wrathful, God is merciful. God hates sin and damns the sinner. God forgives the sinner and declares him righteous. Again, just because you don't like him doesn't mean he doesn't exist. Deal with it. He's a God who is slow to anger, and he's a God who is angry, justifiably so. A new one that's current, the Jesus story is based on myths, and particularly the Mithras myths of the Roman mystery cults. And the real question is this a coincidence or is there a connection? And I don't have the time here to tell you, so that I've got a reference for you there. But the Titanic. In 1898, an author wrote a book about a ship called the Titan that sunk after it hit an iceberg, traveling at speeds in excess of 25 knots. And since the number of the lifeboats on board was the minimum, more than half the passengers perished. This was in the year 1898. 14 years later, the Titanic, with the same displacement as the Titan, crashed into an iceberg traveling at speeds of excess of 25 knots, sunk, and because it had the minimum number of lifeboats aboard, half the passengers perished. Now, are you going to conclude that the Titanic story is based on a prior fictional novel? You would say this is one plopper of a coincidence. In other words, you first have to prove that the gospel is a myth, and then you can compare it to other myths. But you can't say just because it follows the pattern of other myths, it is itself a myth. It has to be proven on its own terms. That's just faulty reasoning.